on this one. I had a little bit of snooky tan added to the insides. So what I did is I sprayed some of the aniline stains I mixed and used the airbrush to just finely powder the insides of the violin. I used to do it with the rack before, but I found it just kind of gets too messy. So just a light sort of golden oak finish to the insides, and then I did use a little bit of horsetail to just burnish that all together. And next thing was the stamps, and there's a different thoughts on that, but I do believe when you have a nice stamp, it's there for life. It's hard to remove, and it just gives a little bit of authenticity and pride. If someone is willing to put their own name and stamp it deep, that means they will stand for their work. So I normally stamp the top and the bottom blocks, bass bar and the top plate itself. I might put one to the neck inside of the peg box, but I haven't finished the scroll yet, so I will stamp one inside of the peg box. So that just gives good track on the violin, and if any parts are changed, well, someone is going to notice that. So, and personally, I like to keep track of my violins, and when I sell one, they're going to have service for life. So as long as I have still a beating pulse, it's going to be complimentary for the life of the player, life of the maker, or life of the instrument itself. And repairs I like to do myself because I know it the best. So what I normally do on mine is I give special service for repairs and all that. So in the end, you don't just buy a product, you buy a relationship between the maker and the player. So that way there's always someone who to rely, because in modern days it's hard to find a decent maker or someone who is willing to give time for and helping players or makers alike. So just something little different way to try, because well, obviously the modern ways and just looking for the sale doesn't really work. So that way it adds value for the maker and the player itself. It is quite fantastic. As a violinist myself, I did have a hard time sometimes to find the right people, but I was lucky enough to know a maker when I was studying in the schools for music. So the whole, just my musical development and my whole career and life was basically for one person who took interest of me, was one violin maker I had good relationship with, and he would always just giving me a violin to play for free. And then I grew up that violin itself, and there was something better. So that's what I try to pass on, is the relationship between the makers and the players, rather than just the profit margins and it's out of the door. It's not my problem anymore. So something little different in there. What we also did is do a glue size onto the top plate and the ribs, and the reason being for that is it just kind of saturates the surfaces, so when you put the glue on, it doesn't all soak in and give you the dry socket, but also it acts like it just solidifies the wood itself. So if repairs are done, you don't get that much splinters of wood. So it has the two purposes: to give a little bit more strength for the glue, but also strengthening the glue surface. So when repairs are necessary, it doesn't fall apart. And next step was to just make sure everything was all in line and there was nothing missing. And then what we do is we clamp the violins. It's called dry clamping. So we close the box and just shuffle everything together so you get the nice overhang and everything should be all good, and you see all the gaps if you did little mistakes between the plate and the ribs. So that way I know exactly how it goes together, and it's always good to have a first try without glue. C's are the most important, so for the gluing process, again, I think we had the same chat when the back went on, but again, C's were the first ones to go. It basically measures everything up and lines everything together, and then the neck, the top bouts and the bottom bouts. And the same method when I start gluing is I take some of the clamps off from the C's and then glue that part, clean it well, and then just clamp it all together, and then continue from C's to other C, and that's basically your anchor, and then rest of it kind of follows. For new builds, I like to do the same thing what I do for restorations and the builds, because it is the most reliable what I found myself. There's always the cowboy way. It is just spread some glue on the top to the ribs, and then you just have to hurry. But sometimes you just don't get as nice a glue job, and you get weak spots. So, well, sometimes they go really easy together, but I just don't want to stress myself. And the reason for cleaning is, well, it's just way easier to remove all of the crud from the edges. Some makers leave some more in there, but I don't find it necessary. I started squaring the neck block. I use Bosnian maple, and this piece was quite a nice piece. So I was quite pleased how the flame and how easy it was worked with, because not always you get the nice piece. So the first step would have been just squaring the top surface all flat and straight, and because it's quarter sawn, you want all of the grains just perfectly perpendicular, I believe is the word. So but I did the surface, and that basically is my anchor point again. So everything determines from that top. The better it is, the more true your scroll is going to be. Also in the sides, I square both sides fully flat, and the missing wood, because it's a quarter sawn and normally little wedge shaped, I just add some scrap wood, and that just keeps it all nice and square. It's going to be removed anyways, but for measuring and just processing, if everything is nice and square, there's way less to make mistakes. A little simple principles, pain in the butt, but if you follow it, it's going to be so much better. So after everything was nice and straight and square, I did transfer the template lines to the scroll, and I used 2 pins to just pin it up in there. And because it's got removed, the wood gets removed, all of the markings are gone anyways. So that just gives me a little bit more stable points I can really mess up. And I do it in 2 stages. First, I pin it up in there, and also I do scribe it first, and then I use pencil mark in there just to see the line, but that will give me the ultimate edge I cannot pass. In this case, kind of, well, it's a mental line in there. Later on, when you finish it up, you break every rule you make, but that sense, it just gives me one process to the next, at least the main anchor lines. And if I want to make it anything else in there, I can then finish it with my own style. But at least for the beginning, you kind of want to work it step by step and try to fit the next goal rather than just going all random and panic in there. Other one was the full center line, and I do use a scriber to scribe the full center line all the way to the scroll and the side, and that also gives me an anchor point where all of the mirror image of the scroll itself, because it basically is mirror other side. So as long as you get the other one, you just copy it to the other, and then everything, the nice center line is all marked clear. You can't really deviate that much from it. It's always the wood twists naturally, so the closer you get the first time, during years we always see some scrolls and necks twisting slightly, but that's the natural way of the wood moving itself, and that's one reason why I like my wood perfectly quartered and straight, because anytime you have something that goes slightly off, it will follow the weakest link. The edge work was, again, I do kind of cross between the French style and the Italian style, and then So having a little bit of a nice sort of sharp chamfers close to the purfling, just, but not overly sharp, and then a little bit more ovalish of the edge work itself. So for me it should, my style should mimic almost like airplane wing design when you have gracious curves, but they kind of they just feel like they take all of the resistance away, like wind resistance and all that, but it just have a really nice shape itself, and it's naturally occurring and has higher strength itself. The same ones we can see on bridge designs and all the other ones. So why would you not use the most natural, perfect designs? Because the whole violin concept itself, it is mimic of natural design, how like a human body, the mimic of the human sound and the body itself, it's basically presentation of us. And also you get all of the golden rules and how the scrolls is designed. It has like a shell design, so the spiral, the whole theme runs throughout the violin itself. So what better way is to sort of embrace the actual design and the thought of the design than go with the more of a holistic way, even though it sounds hippie. I don't know, it seems to gives the most pleasure for the build itself. I did do more different ways when I was studying in the school, and we always had to draw and make something specific and perfect. But in the end, that seemed to be like something is holding you back. You try to make something exact, perfect copy and perfect measurements, and sometimes it just doesn't work. If you make something perfect, the sound is not there, but it will be perfect in any ways. But I think we have gone a little further than just aiming for the perfection. It should be extension of your own personality, and again, you're making something with this is used by a person who is not going to be perfect in any way. And if that happens, well, I need to learn something more. But anywho, yeah, so other one also you see me again doing some of the edge works again, and I use a block with sandpaper, and I work both plates. And what that gives me is, now I see the outline and I can measure it between the overhang, and then I just kind of blend all of the little kinks, and when you put some glue sizing to the edges and all that, the wood swells, so just get everything got nice and smooth. The method what I use, it seemed to be the best I found so far. But nothing is forever. If I find something better, I will probably adapt that. But yeah, the finger rasps are more new style for me. I did use more scrapers and files and knives in the past, but I did find nicer product, and little finger rasps are one of my main tools to do edge work. It just cuts so much more time. It's a little bit more rougher, but with decent practice and technique, it works really well. And also, I do use sandpaper, even though many people cringe on modern techniques. There's nothing wrong with it. I do finish the fuzzy part with the scrapers, and then go with the horsetail finish. It pretty much removes everything I I did with the sandpaper, but it just gives me more control of how the shapes come together. I can see more detail with the shadows rather than being more sort of facety where your eyes get fixated to little imperfections rather than a full shape. And some of the corners I started to round up a little bit more into more natural states, so I try to mimic natural wear by just like flick some sandpaper and all that, so it has a little bit more of a natural appearance. And most of the techniques in the tool handling is almost like, well, the violin playing didn't go all waste. So some of the tool handling techniques is pretty close to actual violin playing, but a little funny side note in there. But the same thing when you try to mimic how it's played with the tools, you make the tool marks more authentic. So rather than just copying and marking, well, the original had a little hole in there and I just kind of make a similar one, you pretend how it's going to wear in the next 100 to 200 years, and then you kind of handle it. Or just, I don't know, if you give it to a child, it does it in 5 minutes, but you have to think in a couple of weeks. But yeah, it is just, it takes the edge out and it feels more, well, it's broken in. Nobody likes brand new jeans. You have to wear them at least a few weeks before they become comfortable, and this is my way to make it feel more comfortable. It's already broken in the sense of design, but yeah, that's one way to look at more aging rather than just forcing it to be aged. More natural way of using tools to mimic the wear. I think that's one way to look at it. So I'm still working on it. More new technique I've been studying myself. So let's see if it all comes together in the end. But I'm quite excited of how it's coming so far. Hopefully this one sparked interest of young makers and people who want to learn making. That's my take on this, is